So I've been thinking about this for a really long time, and I don't have the evidence for it yet, but at some point I will try to create the psychosocial experiment to better understand this. All I can say is it feels like there's a lot of representative control and research data happening around us. So in behavior analysis, there are 4 functions of behavior. Four tested, replicatable functions of behavior, which basically means as a result of the consequence of this function, behavior is either maintained or eliminated. If I do these things, I get what it is that I want. And those 4 things have an acronym. A lot of people know them as SEAT, but there's sensory as a tangible. So I do something to get a sensation or to get away from a sensation. Escape. I do something to get away from something that's actively happening. Or avoidance, which is I engage in avoidant behavior. So I try to not come in contact with a person or a thing. And then tangible, right? So most people do things for attention. It's escape, avoidance, and then the A is attention. So I do things to either get attention or get away from attention. Most people do things for that social aspect of it, or the tangible aspect, right? I want people or I want money. Let's be real. And fundamentally, you could argue that social aspect and that tangible aspect, right? People and money make the world go round. But I've argued for a long time, and other scientists have said that there's a 5th function out there. That 5th function just was never tested and studied directly by Brian Awada, but we sure could test it. And it's power and control. And it's easy for a clinical scientist to think to themselves, well, power and control have elements fundamentally of that attention, so social reinforcement and tangible reinforcement, money. But part of the test is, would it be done in a vacuum, right? So to eliminate that social aspect, the attention aspect, would somebody still crave power and control if there was no access to people around them? Would they still crave power and control in a vacuum? Yeah. And the best example of that is my husband and I were talking about the prison system. And there are people who are in solitary confinement. Incredibly limited access to people and to things. And those are humans that could spend 20 years, potentially, isolated, removed from those powerful reinforcers, and still be plotting their next move. That is ultimate power and control. It doesn't mean that they have to be influencing power and control. I think it's an internal state that's reinforced by superstitious contingencies, but probably real life contingencies too. But these days in this world, there is just no effing way that you can tell me that power and control is not a mitigating factor for people's behavior. The belief that they could access that social attention or that tangible, the belief that I could gain access to the sensory input I want, or to escape to the degree that I want. Shit. It's a powerful motivating factor for me sometimes. But power and control ultimately lead to the greatest sin. And what I don't think that we've done well enough is study the connection between behavior analysis and theology. Because at the end of power and control is greed. And to me, greed is the ultimate sin. Greed is the sin that all other sins are built from. I don't lust after anyone else if I'm not greedy enough to think that I can have it, right? The opposite of humble and humility. In order to believe in greed, you have to believe that you have some sense of power and control, whether it's literally reinforced in your life or not, which is fundamentally antithetical to behavior analysis. But stick with me here, because I really do believe that there's a tightly woven thread between behavior analytic principles and the power of faith and belief. So I'll keep trying to unpack that. Stick with me here. If you're a behavior analyst and you have other research or data, let me know. BF is probably up there shaking his head at me right now, but I've lived a life where I've come in contact with some really interesting characters. And I just feel like this keeps coming more and more true in my life. So, tell me what you think.